EAGLES, Eagles.
I've said it before, John. I've said it before, but you guys have great intro music. It's just the way you guys, it gets your toes tapping, at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Zander got a little fidgety there. He had you on the right side, me on the left side. I was all backwards. Now he got it right. Made the quick switch. You didn't even notice.
I didn't.
Your eyes were down. Yeah.
I got the, and also my setup is camera, monitor, camera, monitor.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, you like that? I go through my progressions. That's what I do. You know what I mean?
1, 2, and then dump it off. That's it.
Exactly. And John, it's great to be on with you again. I had a lot of fun with you on Wednesday. Happy to be hanging out with you again today, my friend. I am a little shocked. And anytime somebody tells me, oh, they're talking about the Eagles quarterback, I'm not shocked. But sometimes I do get a little...
I kind of am. It's been a slow news year for Jalen Hurts because there's so much other stuff going on with the Eagles.
Oh, certainly.
So I actually, we haven't talked about him that much on the show, and we talk about the Eagles every day. And obviously it peaked a little bit because now we're talking about sponges and Kellen Moore. And I thought Jalen Hurts was pretty good, honestly, in his first press availability since clean out day last year. So I thought he handled the Brian Johnson stuff pretty well, deflected off that and said, hey, look, I'm going to let Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier build their foundation. And then he'll probably come in and say, I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. So I thought it was positive. I'm not going to overreach and say, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. Mark, he's really going to be back to 2022. And that's what what you have to hope for. But I thought it was a positive first step. I will say that.
I don't get, look, I'll be honest with you. I watch everything. I watch every press conference, all that stuff. And because this is what we do. We talk about sports. And if you're in Philadelphia, you talk about the Eagles. If you're on a show called Birds 365, you talk about the Birds 365. And I'm watching those press conferences. And for the vast majority of them, especially Jalen Hurts, do I want little morsels I could take out and go, oh, hold on. This is where I can call BS, because you look for little situations like that because those become lightning rod situations. Those become good topic points and all that stuff for a show. And I watched Howie and I watched Nick and I went, ooh, there's a lot of material. There's a lot of material here.
They're back to the two-man show. They're back to giggling like teenage schoolgirls. If you go back to last season, Howie and Nick, they were like stressed and just morose and not making the crack in the jokes, and now they're back. So
they're talking about what was it?
Ones,
was it 3-card Monty? They were talking about 3-card Monty to start out the press conference. They didn't even know the cameras were on. Yeah, they're having all sorts of chuckles and
they switch chairs. Similar, it's like what Zander was trying to do. They switch chairs. They're having fun. Howie's doing his one-man show. Always with jokes. Yeah, it's good stuff.
So I'm watching them, and I go, okay, lots to talk about there. And then I watched Jalen Hurts, and I got to be honest, after the, whatever it was, 11 minutes that he talked, I went, damn it. There wasn't a lot. There wasn't, things I could pick apart. Everything you said, I went, that makes sense. I get that. That's the right way to approach that. Even when he was asked about leadership, he talked about not necessarily stepping out of his comfort zone to a fraudulent degree, but understands that he needs to be more of the vocal leader and take more of that role and not defer it as it would be to guys in the past like Jason Kelce or guys like Fletcher Cox or A.J. Brown, especially on the offensive side of things, that he's got to set the standard. And I feel like he already thinks he does that with his work ethic. But to be a great leader, it doesn't just take running through the brick wall. It takes being able to tell everybody else they need to run through the brick wall as well. Like vocally tell them that, not just show them that. And I think he has an understanding of that. And listening to his answer when he was asked more or less the question about, you have said that every team needs to be a little bit different going year from year. How will you be different to be what this team needs in a leadership capacity? And he laid it out there perfectly that he needs to A, set the standard, B, continue to work his butt off and set the example as well. And then, yeah, when he needs to say something, he will say something, but not to the point of every single day or every single week he's rah, shish goom bah, calling out guys left and right.
I don't get it. I don't get when people want others to change their personalities to make them happy. I mean, your personality is your personality. You have a spectacular personality. I'm more understated than Mark Barzetta, but you can't change your personality. You can accentuate what you do well to help others as a quarterback, and that's a position. And I asked Jalen that question because it's a position that demands leadership by the nature of the position. But that doesn't mean you have to do it a certain way, and you have to be over the top and very emotional, as Tom Brady was at certain times, and or tremendously stoic like Jalen Hurts has been. There's back and forth. People are different, and people can handle things. And there's, if you pick up the GPS today, you can find a bunch of routes to get to the same place. And you're trying to get to a certain place, but there's a bunch of different ways you can get there. And Jalen talked about that last year because I think he was, feeling attacked a little bit unfairly. Maybe that's too strong a word, but he had mentioned when we were winning games, everybody was thrilled with his stoic personality and how calm he was, and the even keel and the flat line, and nothing bothered him. And then when you start to lose a little bit, it's a big problem. Well, which is it? You don't. Oh, I got to pick up today, and I got to act like a lunatic because we lost a couple games. No, he is who he is, but it is a little bit different from the perspective, Mark, of you don't have Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox, so you can't defer that part of it. And he is going to have to pick it up behind the scenes a little bit, and that's more than just him. Those are two big leaders you're losing. So, and you still have Lane and Brandon, Brandon for one more year, and that's some of the young guys, and we'll see who takes that baton. But there'll be somebody,
I put it to you like this. The specific example that I'll bring up with Jalen Hurts in how he could do a little bit more, not the grabbing the pom-poms, but a little bit more. The situation that came up last year when you missed Devontae Smith for a game, I think it was after the Seattle game, and he texted Quez Watkins. Do you remember this story? He texted Quez Watkins, "Hey, be ready." Something along those lines. Be ready. And Quez, again, typical Quez, I've been ready. You know what I mean? Like, maybe instead of the text message, as it was last year, if the same situation has to come up where somebody has to be the next man up, maybe that's a arm around moment. Maybe that's a slap in the butt moment. Maybe that's a, make sure you seek him out in practice and have that personal interaction with somebody. And maybe that pushes things over the top a little bit more, where you take a little bit more of a step in the leadership direction, where it's not some, digital text message. It's actually face to face. I'm here for you. I got you. Let's go over things if you want to do it. This is a big opportunity for you. That kind of thing, where that's not rah, but that's being and having a more personal connection with somebody. I think that might be a step in the direction of being a better leader if you're Jalen Hurts.
Well, they see each other every day at practice. Sure. Look, I'm not going to put on my backwards hat. I'm not the younger generation, but they text. I mean, let's be honest. And even to the point of, they can be in the same room texting because they don't want somebody else to know. But, that to me is what it is. And that's just a newer generation. Even me, I'm like, why is this asshole calling me? Just text me if I see my phone ringing. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to get caught up in that kind of stuff. But I look, he's still 25 years old. I think, think about Jason Kelsey at 25. He wasn't Jason Kelsey that you think about today. Nobody was knocking down his door for podcast and wanting to make him the mayor of Philadelphia. He grew into his enormous personality, even from that standpoint.
He may have eaten in Wing Bowl. He may have eaten in Wing Bowl by 25 or 26.
But he wasn't chasing Kelsey as we see him today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And even Fletcher Cox as well, different type of leader. He's a good young player, but he wasn't, Fletcher Cox. And Fletcher talks about Trent Cole and how close he is to Trent Cole and, how he brought him along. And that's sort of the growing. And these guys are really young. So, I put AJ in that category too, because, now he's on Instagram and putting Tom Brady's picture up and people are losing their mind over that. I'm like, oh, that's my favorite kind of reporting. These lunatics who follow players on Instagram and he took it 5 seconds later. He took Buffalo off his Instagram, Mark. Oh my God, the sky is falling.
Yeah, put on your backwards hat there, John. A little internet sleuthing. Come on.
Exactly. So, but these are young men and they're not going to be the same as 35-year-old men. Everybody grows up. Everybody matures at a different rate. And even, Jeffrey Lurie with Julian, ready to take over the franchise whenever, said Jalen Hurts was the most, at the time, I guess he was 24, the most mature 24-year-old he's ever met. Still 24,
Sure.
And he is one of the most mature 25-year-olds now that you'll ever meet, but he's still 25. And I think people forget that sometimes.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the reasons I have a lot of confidence in him. And one of the things I loved that he said in his press conference was the sponge line. And I hear him getting ridiculed for wanting to learn from, God forbid, the most experienced offensive coordinator and play caller he's ever had in his career. I really took exception to people that found a negative in that, because isn't that not what you want to hear from your quarterback? That I don't know everything. I could really learn in this position. I can learn from a guy who's had a #1 ranked offense. I've never had that before. And I can learn from somebody who's called plays for over 5 years in the NFL, has worked with multiple quarterbacks. I can learn from him. Let me learn a little bit. And then maybe if there's something that he isn't highlighting that I think I do well, that's where I could add my 2 cents. And I thought what he had to say about being a sponge with Kellen Moore here is exactly what you want to hear from him, is it not?
It depends. I mean, everybody, how people are, Mark. So remember Brad Johnson, the Super Bowl winning quarterback in Tampa Bay?
Yes, of course.
And our old buddy, Brad Childress. So Brad got a head coaching job in Brad Childress, and Brad Johnson was going to be the starting quarterback that first year.
In Minnesota?
He came back.
That's right. Yeah.
And he, at the time, Brad was very smart. That was his whole thing. He was a tremendous processor. He could run things from the line of scrimmage, a little bit of a different era. And he was telling me the story. And at the time I was like, boy, Childress is a dick. But so basically he went into their first meeting and he had notebooks, because Brad was that type of guy, full of stuff he was comfortable running, wanted to run. And, trying to make the best of a bad situation, to be honest, for a rebuilding team. And he was an aging guy, didn't have a whole lot left. And Brad Childress told him, hey, when you're a coach, you can run your stuff. When I'm the coach, we're going to run what I want to run. And I'm like, woof, what a dick. But, so it's a different way. I took it as, why wouldn't you try to take advantage of the best attribute of your current quarterback? And that was smart, veteran, savvy, really understands the game guy. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And now you're talking about Jalen, and people are saying, should he be the alpha? Should he be in there with notebooks? Should he be steering Kellen Moore? I guess is what you're trying to say. Well, he's 25. He's not that veteran quarterback who's had all that experience and that kind of stuff, number one. But number two, I just say that to point out people look at things different ways. So you could look at it as a good thing, and you could look at it as he better at some point, as I do, want to take ownership of this offense and want to impart what he does well to Kellen Moore and mesh that. But I have no problem with him waiting for the foundation as he described it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was perfect. I thought it was the perfect answer. I want him to feel like he's in a situation where he can actually learn something from a very experienced play caller at the NFL level. And I also want him to feel like he could give his input. He said that would come later, but he wants the coaches to set the foundation, and then he'll follow along as the player. As long as this offense does what Nick Sirianni, the most brilliant thing I heard from Nick Sirianni last year, and it's a short list, but the most brilliant thing that I heard, but the most brilliant thing I heard from him was, we're going to embrace the uniqueness of Jalen Hurts' game. And I thought that's the perfect way to put it, because it doesn't mean you're going to run too much. It doesn't mean you're just going to throw. It means you're going to embrace the uniqueness of Jalen Hurts' game, which is if he has this great skill set on a physical level of being able to run for yards, being able to, push ahead in a tush-push situation, whatever, you're going to use that. And that makes sense to me. I can't imagine that Kellen Moore is going to have this quarterback that has a very unique game and square peg, round hole it. I feel like he is going to embrace what Jalen Hurts does well. Is he going to try to coach up other attributes that he has? Sure. Is he going to try to use them to the team's advantage? I would hope so. I don't think he's a moron coming in here. I think that he's going to do what the Eagles set out to do last year.
I think you're right, but it's hard sometimes. He's never had a quarterback like this. So, Dak Prescott has some movement ability, but not like Jalen Hurts. Justin Herbert's got more movement ability than people realize, but he's not Jalen Hurts. So there is an extra +1 sort of in the running game, zone read, run pass options, run pass, run options, and the Eagles take it to that layered level where you have the 3 options. So it's different. And until you see him do it, and until you see him mesh it together, I don't know if he can do it, or I don't know, he might. See, the problem with most coaches, and I talk about this with manufactured touch players all the time, and we got to get the break because I see Damo popped in, but coaches, I don't like manufactured touch players, except for Kyle Shanahan and a few others, because coaches talk about it in the spring. I say this all the time, Mark. We're going to do this, and we're going to get this guy in space. And then it takes a lot of discipline to do that on game day. You might have it scripted in the first 15 plays, but then to keep going back to it and going back to it and going back to it, you got to be very disciplined, because the easiest way to get somebody open is, hey, go run a route. And guys run good route, and everybody defaults to it is my point. So until you see somebody utilize a unique player effectively, there's always going to be question marks about it.
No, that makes sense. All right, we're going to continue to talk about this throughout the day. Paul Domowitch is going to be joining us momentarily. We'll get to the Isaiah Rodgers story as well, not getting reinstated, unlike 5 other players that got reinstated in the NFL. So the Eagles don't get a little help in that category. But Paul Domowitch will be joining us coming up in a few here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today, and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back, Birds 365. Mark Farzetta, John McMullen with you. And joining us right now, our guest here in the early portion of the program, the great Paul Domowitch joins us. Paul, Domo, how are you, sir?
Doing well, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well, Domo. Good to see you, bud. Usual Friday morning spot for the great Paul Domowitch. Lot to talk about. I mean, it never stops with this team, and you know, whether it's AJ Brown on Instagram and people lose their mind, that drives me insane, Damo. Isaiah Rodgers, by the way, Eagles fans, you mentioned him, you teased it, Mark, before the break. The 2 things I learned yesterday. Eagles fans have already convinced themselves this guy's Deion Sanders in his prime. I mean, they're incensed that the league didn't reinstate him, and we'll see how that shakes out. And then obviously Howie and Nick spoke, and we got the talk to Jalen Hurts for the first time since clean-out day. But I want to throw out a curveball to you before we get to all of that, Tomo. And that's the number 1 guy that the Eagles trotted out for media availability as off-season work was Cam Jurgens. That's like a Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey spot. Am I overreading that? Or do they want Cam Jurgens to immediately step into one of those sort of leadership spots?
Well, they want him to, and I think the fact that they brought him out so early, they're trying to convince everyone that they believe he can step in.
So do I. It could be timing. Oh, here's Cam. Let's get Cam. Yeah. But I think there's more meaning behind it.
Yeah. I mean, they want there to be no doubt that Cam Jurgens is going to replace Jason, and he can step in both as a leader and as a snapper. So, time will tell.
Yeah, they taking his locker when he led with that. When the question was, "How you doing?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, they put me in Jason Kelsey's locker, so that's kind of weird." I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I don't know.
It probably took about 2 months and about 5 U-Hauls to get Kelsey's stuff out of there. By the way.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. But Damo, I want to ask you about this thing with the offensive line here, because we look at this Eagles offense and we see how stacked it is at the skilled positions. We're talking about wide receiver, tight end, and running back and all that, and the expectation for Jalen Hurts going into the season. And it just seems to be a given that if Jeff Stoutland meets you, that means you could be a great offensive lineman. How much of a drop is there going to be? And I expect some drop, and Cam Jurgens, I think, will be a good center. I will hold off on great, but he is taking over for a guy playing at an all-pro level, a guy that's a Hall of Famer, and he's coming in to fill those shoes, at least at a serviceable spot. And Then you don't know for sure what's going to go on with the right guard position. So overall, how do you think this offensive line will be in the upcoming season? How much of a drop-off do you expect?
Well, there's going to be a drop-off. I mean, we're talking about a future Hall of Famer that you've just taken out of that equation at probably the most important position on that front. So, I mean, we don't know about Cam Jurgens at center. We know about him at right guard. He handled himself well. Center's a whole nother ballgame. I mean, he's played it. It's a very cerebral position. I mean, Jason got better and better as his career went on. I assume, they're hoping the same thing with Cam. But for him to step in and play at the level Jason has the last 2, 3, 4 years, I think is asking a lot. It would help if Tyler Steen or whomever plays right guard, does a good job at that position so that, Cam doesn't have to worry about his right to the guy to his right. But yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of drop off. Now, whether it will be enough to make a difference in games, we'll find out. Only time will tell on that.
Yeah, and I'm speaking of signs, and Mark mentions Cam taking over Jason's locker. Damo knows that's what they do with the offensive line. They're the cool kids at the back right end of the Eagles locker room, and it's always been that way for years. Jason Peters had the last stall. Now it's Jordan Mailata. And they do it in order. So it's Jordan, it's Landon Dickerson, it's Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, and Lane Johnson. So when Tyler Steen got the right guard locker, a lot of people made a big thing out of that. Now, I didn't make a big thing out of that, Dama, because they got to give it to somebody. They're not going to leave it empty saying we're going to wait for the draft. They have to give it to somebody. So while I just made a big thing about them trotting out Cam Jurgens, I think that was a sign. I don't think Tyler Steen getting the right guard locker is a sign he's going to be the right guard. Am I right or wrong on that one? They want him to compete, but yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, Matt Hennessy, if he's healthy, certainly is going to compete for that job. We don't know what they're, how they're going to, where they're going to draft an offensive lineman. Will it be with that first round pick? Will it be in the second round? I mean, will they bring a guy in that they see as a replacement eventually at right tackle for Lane, but that can step in right away and play right guard? I mean, those are questions that are still unanswered. I think Matt Hennessy's a terrific player. He was a terrific player until he got hurt. Now, that's a big if that, can he stay healthy? I mean, we're asking the same question on defense about Avonte Maddox. I mean, availability is, 70% of the game in the NFL.
Yeah.
Paul, the other thing when you talk about that offensive line, we talked about the right guard spot though, but when you talk about the entire offensive line, not just that center position, there was a lot done there to help Jalen Hurts, and that does focus on the center spot, but shifting coverage, helping read the defense and all that stuff. You had a guy at Jason Kelsey's level that could do all that, and I know you're looking at a guy like Cam Jurgens that's still trying to learn all that at the NFL level. Do you see a shift of Jalen Hurts doing more of the shifting and coverage as opposed to Cam Jurgens in his first year as the Eagles starting center?
Well, I wouldn't want to put too much on Jalen because, I mean, he's in a situation where you're hoping to see him improve this year over last year. I mean, he clearly regressed. So, I mean, I don't want him suddenly handling a lot of a lot of the assignments up front and stuff like that. I would hope Cam's a smart guy. I'm assuming he can handle all of that. He's learned from Jason, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. The questions I have with Cam are, he's an athletic guy, but nobody was as athletic as Jason. Nobody could get out on screens and get to the second level like Jason. Those are things they have to adjust to. Jalen's going to have to address, find out early on, how this protection works and, where he feels, how comfortable he feels behind it. So that's why I think, we need to see the center and the right guard play well early to give Jason or Jalen some confidence back there.
Yeah, Dama, when you talk about Jason Kelsey, and you're probably going to be looking at those clips as you get his Hall of Fame case ready. I mean, I don't think he can replace his athleticism. I mean, there's those clips of him running downfield with absurd receivers and running backs. I think you just got to go about it a different way. The Eagles have tried to get as athletic as possible with Cam Jurgens, but I just don't think you can replace that trait. So you have to go about it a little bit differently. But when it comes to protections, and maybe we'll get to talk to Kellen Moore at some point, we'll get a better indication. Do you prefer the quarterback? I mean, with Jason, it was like, all right, you don't have to worry about that. Jason will figure it out. Now it's a little bit different, even from just an experience level, because I'm with you. I think Cam's a really smart guy. But do you want the quarterback more involved with setting protections?
I don't think he's ready for that. I mean, like I said, he's got more on his mind right now as far as getting better with his play. I really would prefer that he focus on that more so than turning into Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, I think he's going to have to pick up more responsibility. He's capable of it. I'm not suggesting that Jalen's not a smart guy. The things he needs to get better at, more so than being able to set protections and stuff like that, is moving around back there. I mean, we saw last year he was so predictable. You know, as soon as he was flushed, he went to his right. Very seldom stepped up. Can't throw when he runs to his left, and teams were making him run to his left. You know, those are the areas he needs to improve at this year. And, you know, more so, that's why I don't want him focusing too much on setting protections and things like that.
Fair enough.
By the way, it feels like deja vu, guys, because that's what we were talking about after the Tampa Bay loss in 2021. He couldn't go left. He couldn't, that's disappointing, the regression. Sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
No. So, Donald, when you look at the coaching aspect of that, how much of this is going to fall on Coach Ness, as Jalen Hurts calls him, or how much is it going to fall on Kellen Moore to try to get more production out of Jalen Hurts and try to coach him up a little bit more than what we have seen in years past?
Well, I mean, the QB coach is going to work a lot on his, mechanics, things like that. He spends every day with him. Kellen Moore is going to spend a lot of time with him, but I mean, he's more focused on the big picture. We saw Brian Johnson have a lot more effect, a bigger positive effect on Jalen when he was the QB coach than when last year when he became the offensive coordinator, and the two didn't seem to be on the same page a lot of the times. I think Nussmeier is going to have a lot of responsibility for mentally and physically, mechanically getting Jalen back on the right track this year.
By the way, Coach Nuss was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Florida in 2015, 16, somewhere in that range. And Jalen said he recruited him as well. So I think everybody in the world recruited Jalen Hurts at some point in college. So he had a prior relationship with Doug Nussmeier as well. And people made a big deal of that with Brian Johnson because he recruited Jalen Hurts twice. And as I always pointed out, but he didn't get him. So what does that really mean? I think people kind of that was a little bit overblown. But now Coach Nuss has a prior relationship as well. So hopefully that helps. But I do want to talk about Isaiah Rodgers, Damo, from the perspective of, I spent my whole afternoon yesterday. God, this league is over legislated. They've changed the rule, by the way, since the gambling policy rules, since Isaiah Rodgers has been suspended. He got suspended in June, late June. They revised the policy in September when they realized they were being a little bit harsh on guys who were betting $20 on a basketball game and DraftKings, and they did it in the parking lot of the facility instead of at home. And they revised the whole policy. And then it became 2 years if you bet on your own team, which Isaiah Rodgers was accused of. And then it became all this disinformation all over the place. So I'm on the phone with the Eagles. Of course, I check with the NFL. I'm on the phone with McCarthy, emailing with McCarthy. And so this was the NFL statement. He was eligible to petition for reinstatement after the conclusion of the 2023 season. So the Super Bowl, he did. His status remains under review. What do you get from that? 5 guys, and they're still reviewing Isaiah. Could be timing. Could be he did it a little bit later than those 5 guys. Maybe this afternoon, they say, hey, Isaiah Rodgers is good to go. It doesn't even matter. Eagles fans have talked themselves into this is a meaningful player. He's a bubble player. That's why they're talking about all the cornerbacks. He was a good young player, showed some upside in Indianapolis as a part-time player. Why has Isaiah Rodgers become such a story in this town?
Well, I think probably because, the slot position was not very good last year. I think they see him, and Avonte Maddox is back, but I mean, for what, 2 games? We don't know. 2 games, 16, 17.
Hopefully 16.
A guy with his injury history, anything's a bonus. You can't count on him, but you hope he stays healthy. But
no, but that's my point, Tomo. If you're hoping, and it's just hope, you'd rather have Avonte on the field than Isaiah Rodgers. Now, can I guarantee he's going to be on the field? Absolutely not. Can I guarantee Isaiah Rodgers is going to be on the field? Absolutely not, for a different reason.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a reason the Eagles are talking about getting cornerbacks in the first round.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it'll, knowing Vic, it'll probably be a corner that can play inside or outside. So that's, if Isaiah Rodgers is not reinstated, his name will quickly go by the wayside once they draft a corner in the first or second round that can play inside, and people will be pushing him to be the starting slot guy. So
my theory is that his name is not James Bradbury. That's why people love Isaiah Rodgers so much.
Yeah.
That's just my personal theory.
You probably nailed it.
Yeah, I think it's James Bradbury versus the field right now for a lot of Eagles fans.
And I'm the only one. I want to see James Bradbury in Vic's defense. I think Vic will use him correctly, and I think if by the way, if they draft, it's interesting to me because I think if Bradbury gets a chance in Vic's defense, he will play very well, but he won't even get a chance. I think the Eagles will cut him if they draft a cornerback in the first round. I think they will cut him post June 1st. So
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. So
I'm not as bullish on Bradbury as you are as far as coming back with a rebound season, John. So I don't hold out hope that, he's going to come back and play like he did in,
second team all pros tough. But I think my whole thought, Damo, is he's a very smart player. He was used incorrectly by Sean Desai. I think putting him in the slot was insanity. I said that the day they did it. I can't believe he didn't recognize that. Moving him around, even flipping him to Slay's position when Slay was banged up late. No, just stick him at right corner and let him play zone. And I think you're fine. And from the perspective of people saying he lost the step, he never had a step. He's never been a fast guy. He's just smart and savvy. So I think Vic is smart enough to go, all right, I know what this guy is. I'm going to play him up to his strengths. And I really think he'd have a bounce back year, but we may never see. I may never be able to prove that theory if the Eagles get a corner. And I wouldn't blame them. He's post 30, Slay's 33. They need to get younger. But I would like to see it. I don't think we're going to see it.
I agree.
I
don't want to see it.
That part.
I do wonder how much of a compliment it is when you say this guy's going to do well in Fangio's scheme. When if you're a corner, the scheme is set. It sets you up for success. Does it not? I mean, from what I understand,
no. This scheme drives me insane.
But if you're a corner and you're in quarters, they don't let the guy behind you. That's your job.
I think, and we'll get Damos about. I think this scheme is just misery for young cornerbacks. It is misery. I think you saw it last year. There's so much communication. There's so many blown coverages. If you don't know what you're doing, you look awful in this defense. And you saw it in the Super Bowl. Guys blowing coverages, and everybody's like, what are they doing? They blew the coverage. And it looks awful when they do that, because everybody's got to understand the concept and the routes, and they got to hand off in the routes. And for guys like Slay and Bradbury, that's a lot easier than Kelly Ringo and Eli Ricks. And by the way, poor Eli Ricks playing out of position on top of it. How many blown coverages did you see last year?
Yeah. No, a lot. One of the things that sticks out in my mind is listening to the Dolphins players last year. And I know a lot of things came out after the season about Fangio's demeanor more so than the scheme itself. But a lot of the players during the season were talking about how if you understand the freedom, quote unquote, that's the word they used in Vic Fangio's scheme, then you can do a lot as a corner, as a safety, which is, I think, one of the reasons they brought back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is because I think he has a good understanding of what that freedom is. But if you understand that communication, that's where you'll have the success. But the overall scheme of not letting the guy behind you, don't give up the big play, I think that benefits a corner more so than it does anybody else.
Yeah, I mean,
Dama?
Yeah, there was clearly too much thinking, too much communication last year, particularly because of the fact that the front four didn't get there nearly as fast as they did the year before. So those guys had to play. They had to stick. They had to cover. I mean, they're going to have. It's not like Vic's going to just say, "Do what you want out there." I mean, or get in his face and play.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have to learn this defense. And I agree with Mark that, there's freedom if you know what you're doing. You're going to go for.
Well, that's the key.
Right.
Yeah.
So
But in Jalen Ramsey's case, look, all big time cornerbacks want to press. They just do. And even Xavier Howard, who wasn't the same because he was aging, but in his prime, he was a good press corner. Those guys want to play press. And I talk to A.J. Brown all the time about, cornerbacks he respects, and it's always press guys. Like, nobody wants to play zone. That's the problem. They don't want to play zone, especially the young guys who were stars in college. They're like, let me stick to this guy. Give me this guy. And that ain't Vic's defense. And Vic's defense is complicated by NFL standards. But yeah, if you get it, like Chicago at the top of their game, if you have smart guys who get it, then it could be special. But it is really difficult on young players, really difficult from a communication standpoint. So that's my only concern with any young cornerback coming in. There's going to be hiccups and there's going to be blown coverages. And Eagles fans, the first time they see that blown coverage, and it might be the safety's fault. It might not even be the corner's fault. And they're going to go, we took this guy at 22, or we traded up for this guy. It's tough. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, you better have a thick skin playing in Philadelphia at corner. It's probably next to playing quarterback. It's the most difficult position to play as a rookie, as a young guy who might make mistakes in this town.
Yeah,
absolutely. Dama, when you do talk about that draft, I'll ask you a two-part question. Where do you see the Eagles going in the draft in the first round with that 22nd overall pick? Where do you see them going? And then also, if Howie Roseman calls Paul Domowitch and says, Damo, what should I do here? Where would you push them? What's your prediction and what's your desire for the Eagles to do what they should do with that 22nd overall pick?
They're in kind of a good position, Mark. They're at 22, but the fact that they address so many needs in free agency, more than I thought they would, leaves them in a situation now with those 3 picks in the first 2. They got 3 in the first 2, right? Where they don't have to reach. You're talking corner, offensive line, edge rusher. I think that's where all 3 of those first picks are going to go. That first one, I want to see him take a corner. Even though that's not, you look at Howie's history, that ain't a good, he hadn't done very well with corners early in the draft. They haven't drafted a first round corner since, I guess, Lito Shepherd back
yeah.
in 2002 when Howie was still a cap guy. But that's where I think they need to go. I mean, because of the age factor and Bradbury, they've got to get help there now, and because they don't know what is going to happen in the slot with Maddox and Rodgers. I mean, that's where I think that puts an emphasis on that. But then knowing Howie, they probably take an offensive lineman.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lane Johnson's still at the top of his game, but he's probably 2 years away from retirement. So you've got to start thinking about that position now. It's because of the fact that, I mean, they're looking at the big picture. They're looking at the next 2, 3, 4 years as well as next season. And because they don't know, they need a guy that's going to come in and learn, just like Cam learned from Jason. So I would not be shocked to see that first round pick be a right tackle that can move inside, maybe if Tyler Steen can't cut it.
Yeah, I just think the Eagles' foundational principles match up with the draft this year. I mean, there are so many good offensive linemen at the top of this draft. In corner, I think you're going to have to trade up if you're now. Howie just said, "I like the trades." He admitted. I mean, and all you have to do is look at Devontae Smith, targeted trade up. Jordan Davis, targeted trade up to get him. Even Jalen Carter last year, they moved up one spot to make sure nobody would swoop in and pick him one spot ahead of the Eagles. Even with Jalen, they moved up. So Terrion Arnold's the one guy I focus on and say if he starts to drop to 15, 16, 17, I think they may go up and get him. You bring up the Lito point, which is a good one, Damo, but they wanted to draft J.C. Horn. They wanted to draft Patrick Surtain. They wanted to draft Derek Stingley, and they came off the board too early. So my question is, are any of the corners, including Terrion Arnold, I don't think they're in that category of a Horn, Surtain, Stingley type prospect. That's my concern.
Yeah, probably not. A lot of people have them taking the kid from Clemson if they stay at 22.
Well, he's too.
Yeah.
Can you imagine him and Vic Fangio run support? I can't.
No, I know. I guess out of all the corners, I think they brought in the kid from Iowa,
Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, they brought him in on one of their top 30.
He seems to be the sexy pick now. Everybody's going Cooper DeJean in their mocks.
I always, you look at their history. A lot of their top picks are guys that were on that 30 visit list. So I mean, I wouldn't be.
Jalen Carter was, for obvious reasons. Nolan Smith was as well last year. They brought him in as a top 30 visit. So yeah, and they brought in Cooper DeJean. They brought in Kool-Aid McKinstry from Alabama as well this past week. So yeah, they're looking at all the cornerbacks. They're getting a corner in those first three picks, whether it's 22, 50, or 53. But that's my sort of follow-up, Damo. They don't have a third-round pick, and Jody, hat tip to him, would often say, well, you can't trade up. The Eagles are a contender. This is when you want to trade up, right? You don't want to bounce. Who cares about bodies? I don't care about bodies. I want to find a difference maker. That's how I would look at it. You think how Howie's looking at it that way?
If there's a guy that he really likes, I don't think he'll hesitate. Because I mean, they don't need to. I mean, they need to start focusing on getting cheaper labor for when Jalen's contract really the cap number gets higher, but that's not going to be for a couple of years yet. So they don't have to be thinking right now that, we need to draft 7 rookies that are going to make our roster. I mean, they need to focus on, we need to get a guy that can help us this year. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded up. I don't think we're going to see a big trade up. But I would not be surprised to see them move up 3, 4, even 5 spots if there's a guy they really, really like.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if they do it, and Howie's certainly done it. Andre Dillard, not the best example of it, but it's something that they've obviously done for a guy that they really liked.
Green Bay, Andre Dillard the Packers are gonna rescue.
Yeah, again, not the best example because he's already been around a little bit in the NFL. But the thing that doesn't make sense to me about it is the idea of I don't think you need an offensive lineman right now. If you need depth, I'm not drafting first-round pick for depth for the next couple of years. If it's more of an emergency situation where I think Lane Johnson's retiring following this season, then hell yeah, I'm going to make that acquisition. But I don't think that's going to be the case with Lane. So that's the only thing that makes me think they're not going to trade up, because it's not necessarily a pressing need right now. You could get depth in the undrafted free agent category. You could get depth in free agency or via trade maybe later, more so in free agency. But that's something that makes me think they're not going to trade up. And the idea of Howie going a long time without a pick makes me think there's still a possibility. More so, I think it would even be more likely that they.
I would agree with that to a degree, to a certain point, Mark. It's just that everything with them revolves around Jalen. Every move they make, getting Saquon, adding AJ Brown and drafting Devonta Smith. Everything's around putting the best cast of possible around that quarterback and building the league's top 5 offense. So that's why I think I think it was 2020 when the really horrible year they had. I think their starting line had like 40 games missed because of injuries to starters. But that was an exception. For the most part, they've stayed remarkably healthy the last couple of years, 2-3 years. But I think Howie always prepares for the worst case scenario after that happened. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if they took one now. And even if it meant he sits for 2 years, that they'd be willing to do that.
All right. At PDamo, make sure you follow Paul on X, Twitter, 33rd Team, JAKIB Sports in season, does tremendous work for us with his stat package. I got to end it with AJ with you, Paul, because at some point, look, I think nobody looks at the cap implications. If you trade AJ Brown, it's $22 million in dead money, which isn't even that big of a deal because Jeffrey Lurie's kind of proven that he doesn't care about that stuff. That's money already paid anyway. But you lose about $10 million against the cap in a pre-June 1st trade. Now you can trade him post-June 1st and you actually gain cap space, but there's you'd want to trade him by draft day. That's when you traded for him. That's when you would get the most value. At some point, the Eagles don't want to trade him, but I think at some point it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, when the first time this kind of stuff happened, the Eagles are like, no, we're not trading. What is this about? And AJ's calling WIP, and Kay Adams is asking him, what's the stuff about a trade? And then all of a sudden, a bunch of teams call the Eagles, and Howie, hey, is AJ available? And if one of those teams throws something wild out there, that's where the self-fulfilling prophecy can come into it post-June 1st. This is crazy. And what AJ's got to get off social media, Tomo. I've said it to him personally. He's got to get off.
They need to ban social media more so than gambling. Yeah, they can't have. I mean, there are a lot more disruptive players than AJ Brown.
Oh my God, he's the greatest guy in the world. That's why I can tell him that. Get off social media.
They got a new coordinator that I'm concerned. Like if he doesn't get 7 targets in the first game, how does that work? They need him not only to be productive, but they need him to be in a good place mentally this season. And if he's not, they're going to wish they traded him. So, it's a concern, but it's a concern with, aside from Devonta Smith, who's the one guy who's not probably never going to be a diva in his life, as far as a guy that's a great player. I mean, that's what you get when you have a wide
By
receiver.
the way, Devontae's such an interesting person too, because he is a diva from like a clothes standpoint. The guy is one of the best dressers of all time. He's the best dresser of all time, but he's the most undiva-like receiver you're ever going to meet. Good receiver.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's an interesting dynamic, shall we say? Yeah.
Yep.
I found it funny though when AJ Brown was finally breaking his media silence, he totally threw Devontae under the bus. Like of all the people, he was like, Devontae's a bigger diva than I am, and people are calling me
close-wise.
Oh, close-wise. Okay, all right, fair enough. Fair enough. Damo, an absolute pleasure, man. I know we haven't really talked much over the years, but that's not an intent, unfortunately. But it's an honor to speak to you, my friend. It was great picking your brain.
A lot of fun, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Damo.
The great Paul Domowitch. Yeah, the locker room isn't a social setting, John. If you know somebody, you know somebody. I never really got to know Paul well in shared locker room time, but just I've admired him from afar. It was great to actually, kick it around.
He's a legend.
I enjoy his social media game.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I know that. Yeah, I'm a big reason. I mean, Brian Dawkins is the reason Brian Dawkins is in the Hall of Fame, but I know Paul
Hall of Fame selector. Yeah, Paul Damo. And he's going to get Jason Kelsey in there very early. He's been working very hard for Eric Allen over the years. Unfortunately, it hasn't come to fruition. I think it eventually will. And I asked him about Fletcher Cox last week when he was on, because I think Fletcher's a Hall of Fame player. And I think Damo thinks he'll eventually get there as well. Probably take a little bit longer, but I made that, I got yelled at for that. I think at the height of his career, he was better than Jason Kelsey. People don't like that, but I think at the height of his career, he was better. He was the best Eagles player on the Super Bowl team. He was their best pure football player on the only Eagles team that won a Super Bowl championship. Jason's career was interesting from the perspective of it was weird. Usually the height of your career is in your prime, in the middle of your career, like Fletcher, when he was maybe the second best defensive tackle behind Aaron Donald. Kelsey made all 6 of his all-pros the last 6 years of his career.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
One of the best interviews I heard with Jason Kelsey, he went on Fly on a Wall podcast. Do you know that podcast? It's Dana Carvey, and it's Dana Carvey and David Spade. Okay, it's a Saturday Night Live show, alumni show, and whatever. And I saw Jason Kelsey went on. I went, this is weird. This is him not in his element. This is different. Now, of course, every element is Jason Kelsey's element, but this is closest thing to not being in his element. It's not a sports podcast, is my point. So he had to, I'll use the term mansplain a lot of things, and kind of hearing it from that perspective, really having a guy break it down for the simplest audience, people that don't really understand and know football that well, and hearing him talk about Jeff Stoutland's usage of him in such a simple way, because I'm used to hearing guys like you talk about it, Paul Domowitch talk about, Ray Didinger talk about, guys like that, like really break it down. But to hear Jason Kelsey go to the simplest form of explaining it, he just talked about how we talk about often, and some people cringe at this because it's such a cliche, but coaches putting their players in the best position to win, best position to make plays, right? So Jason Kelsey talked about it with Jeff Stoutland in a very simple way. He said, I have an offensive line coach and a run game coordinator that just understands at my size, it's probably not the best for me to go one-on-one with some defensive tackles that have like 70, 80 pounds on me. Yeah. It's probably better for me to get to that second level. And to him just break it down so simply like that is like, wow, that's a lot of credit to Jeff Stoutland putting his center in the best position to make him shine.
Oh yeah, he gives Howard Mudd a lot of credit because Howard understood that as well. I remember talking to Jason a bunch about Linval Joseph when Linval was on the Giants, and Linval used to give Jason fits because at the time he was regarded as the strongest player in the NFL. I mean, he was a beast, Linval Joseph in his prime. And he obviously eventually became teammates with Jason Kelce. So he's always struggled with those types of guys a little bit. Vita Vea in the playoff game. He did not play well, Jason. But, it's interesting. Jason Kelce himself said there's only 2 players, to your point about Stout, there's only 2 players he ever played with that would be successful regardless of coach or scheme or philosophy. Everybody needs help. But he said the 2 players, and by the way, I think he should have added Lane and AJ to this list, but Jason Peters and Fletcher Cox. That's it. He said those 2 players would have been successful no matter where they landed, no matter what offense, defense, and that speaks volumes as well, because that's coming from Jason Kelce.
Fair enough. Coming up, I do want to delve into the Isaiah Rodgers thing a little bit more with you and the threat that's out there surrounding Isaiah Rodgers. I also want to get into this. I want to make sure I'm saying this right. Bedside blood concussion test.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. But we'll go to break. But that is interesting. That would be quite the advancement.
Yeah, quite the breakthrough. Quite the breakthrough. It's breakthrough, especially when we're just a couple years removed from the how many fingers tests. So this is a great advancement in science. We'll be back here, Birds 365, in a few.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Welcome back, Birds 365. Mark Farzetta sitting in with the great John McMullen, having ourselves a time. I'm still stuck on backwards hat John McMullen. I need I need a backwards hat John McMullen at some point in the next hour. Do you have a hat available?
I do have a hat available. I always have a hat available, but yeah, my backwards hat days are over.
I
had many of them, in my younger days. But,
Ken Griffey Jr. was coming up, man, when I was just a little kid, and it was definitely a flipped lid for Ken Griffey Jr. back in the day, friend. All right, so there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about here, and one is the Isaiah Rodgers thing, because I agree with you. I hear people talking about Isaiah Rodgers like it's like.
By the way, Isaiah seems like he's always on social media. He seems like a good dude, but I haven't met him yet. But I hope he's a great player. But boy, they've made him out to be. He's a nice part-time player in Indianapolis. Looked like he was ascending. But yeah, I mean, settle down, people.
Again, he's not James Bradbury, and it's almost it's kind of like it's the backup quarterback syndrome. That's what it is. Like the one guy's not doing the backup quarterback's great. Most popular guy in town is the guy holding the clipboard usually, right? That whole thing. But with the Isaiah Rodgers story, I find this so fascinating because a lot of people I don't think they get it. And you can tell me if I'm wildly wrong or if I'm accurate here, John. But to me, the threat of the NFL, and people bring up moral things when they talk about a year suspension. And I understand why, because morally, as a collective people, there are worse things than gambling. However, if you're the NFL, far worse things from gambling. Let me just reiterate that. But if you're the NFL, the worst possible thing is somebody watching a game and not thinking that game is legitimate. And the way that happens is if you have players not only betting on sports, which is what you were talking about with the revision of the rule, like, all right, you can bet on basketball, just don't do it in the parking lot, don't do it at the team facility. But Isaiah Rodgers bet on his team, bet on games he played in, and bet from the team facility.
Yeah.
Like every possible horrible box check, like even the most compulsive gamblers looking at that going, not a smart move, bro. And probably Roger Goodell and the NFL is looking at it and going, that's not a good move, because that's exactly what they're worried about. They're worried about fans looking at the sport going, well, this isn't legitimate anymore. Like, why am I going to waste time on this when it's simply guys trying to pad their own pockets that are already, if you're a professional athlete, by the average Joe's standpoint, your pockets are already pretty padded. So why are you trying to get more out of this? That is what I think the NFL is most afraid of above anything else.
Well, they are, but that barn is out of the. I mean, the NFL's kind of leaned into it with the Keegan-Michael Key sort of script writers skit.
Right.
So people already believe that to a certain extent, that the NFL is scripted at times. When their team loses, it's always when their team loses.
Sure.
It's always Jody and I talked about this a lot, and Jody's more of a gambler than I am. But it's a scandal waiting to happen. I mean, you saw what happened in the NBA. I forget the kid's name.
Jonte Porter, I think. Yeah.
Jonte Porter. Yeah. Who's basically, letting people bet prop bets that he's not playing or whatever. I mean, come on, dude. And people are making major money on this kind of stuff. And sorry, you go back to the referee scandal with, Donahue, Tim Donahue.
Yeah, Tim Donahue,
yeah. Who's local to us here in the Delaware Valley. It's easier in basketball, but in football, and I bring up this new tackling rule, Mark. I brought that up at the time, the hip drop tackle, which just came into existence. I love fans with that. Well, it's you can't do that. Shut up. They never even used the term hip drop tackle. I've been covering this game for 25 years. I never heard the term until last year. They just made it up.
You know why? You know why you haven't heard the term? And I'll tell you why. It's called a tackle.
Yeah.
He tackled him. No one looks at look. You can look at the form tackles. You can look at throwing a shoulder into a guy to knock him down on a kill shot, that type of thing. Kill whatever old term, outdated term, kill shot. Excuse me, okay. But the hip drop tackle is a very technical thing that nobody used because it's just a tackle.
Yeah.
So if you're a player, don't get me. All right, if you want to go down that road,
I was going. The rule is stupid. I agree with you, but we can get into that another day. From the gambling perspective, I'm like, how easy would it be? The easiest people, forget about the players. The easiest people to get to would be the officials because they don't make as much money and they can really affect a game and swing a game. How easy is it to throw a flag for a tackle? You get 15 yards. That changes the whole complexion of a potential game.
Absolutely.
There's always unintended consequences, but getting it back to Rodgers, yeah, that was a dumb. I have no problem with him being suspended for a year. And by the way, under the old policy that he got suspended, technically he was suspended indefinitely, at least a year, and he was eligible to be apply for reinstatement after the Super Bowl, which he did. Now they've changed the rule that if you bet on your team, you get a 2-year pop. So is it possible they could say this guy deserves 2 years? I guess they can do whatever the hell they want. It's over legislated. They change rules all the time. My advice to Eagles fans were, I think he's going to be reinstated at some point, unless he's done something else
this year.
Yeah, which since he got suspended.
So that would be what, a 2-year ban?
Well, the new rule is a 2-year ban. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm saying he was suspended under the original rule, which they kind of threw together at the last minute, and they figured out it was too harsh for the guys betting on basketball games.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
I think they suspended a bunch of guys, if you remember, for 6 games, and then they scaled that back to 2 games. That's when it was late September when they changed it, and they said, all right, this is too harsh, and we're going to change it. But they made it more harsh for players betting on their own teams.
As they should.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what I'll say. And the two circumstances are not comparable, but in terms of the entire NFL fan base being in an uproar simultaneously, if gambling spreads to the players and it continues to be guys betting on their own teams in the practice facility and betting in games that they're playing in, then that's obviously going to be an uproar league-wide. But the last time I saw a league-wide uproar from the fan base was the replacement officials, John, where everyone was like, well, this isn't legitimate. And the game wasn't legitimate when you had replacement officials running the show. You at least have the idea with the officials today that, well, they're the best. They're the best at what they do, so that's why they're there. When you clearly have people that are not there, that are the best to do the job, people question the integrity of the game. People are going to question the integrity of the game when you're influencing the outcome of games because you're betting on them.
People are really, I found this out over the years, Mark. People are really bad in general when it comes to unintended consequences. The NFL fought for years to keep gambling out of the game for this type of reason. Now, as everything with the NFL, greed is a part of it too. They also didn't want anyone making money off their product. If there was going to be something, they better get a cut of it because we're the ones providing the product and the popularity. And when they saw it get to the point where you're swimming upstream and it's going to change, you know, the strategy from the league shifted to, well, we got to monetize this ourselves, and understandably so. But if you want to, NIL in college,
yeah.
You got all these people on their soapbox for years. You're taking advantage of these young kids. That's their unintended consequences. Now everybody wants the hell out of college football. Transfer portal, everybody moves around. Guys getting paid millions of dollars to stay at college. It has an effect on the game and the product and all unintended consequences. Doesn't matter your moral proclivity. People should be allowed to gamble. It's bad for the game because, as you pointed out, you don't want people affecting the outcomes of games. It's pretty simple.
It's cut and dry in that regard. Yeah.
So, you should have kept it out. you can't. And now we are where we are. And you just got to make the best of it. And there are going to be more players suspended. Maybe the whole Indianapolis team. It seems to be everybody in Indianapolis. They have some gambling problems out there. Poor Shane Steichen. There's going to be more guys suspended. So when you have somebody like Isaiah Rodgers, if you get him, great. If you don't get him, just forget about him.
I don't know who it was.
Advice.
I don't know who it was. I looked down in the chat for a second, and I saw somebody say, this Rodgers guy doesn't sound like he's smart enough to understand the coverages of Vic Fangio's scheme. If he's betting on his own team and games he's playing in from the team facility.
Well, and and Jody and I would have these discussions, and he was more a hardliner. Like, I don't think when they started this, I don't think they educated the players very much. They basically sent out a memo and said, this is what you can't do. This is what you can't do. And again, Jody's more of a hardliner, and he said, well, they're adults. Well, yeah, they are adults, and I get it from that perspective. But we were all, when I was 23, 24, I was a freaking idiot. I didn't pay attention to anybody. And so was the vast majority of people. So you do have to educate people, and I think they were too harsh, and that's why they changed it.
Yeah.
But if you don't know you shouldn't bet on your own team, yeah, you probably can't understand Vic Fangio's defense. So maybe that commenter has a point.
Yeah, you know? I think so. I think so. And the other thing is, I love when people say these guys are adults. Okay, let's just live in that world for a second here. I've seen adults do plenty of stupid stuff, and I admit now I'm an adult. I don't just do the adulting that has become a big phrase nowadays and all that. Like, adults, they mess things up from time to time.
Stuff all the time.
I love that. They're both they're adults. They're adult. Like, oh, adults are perfect. I was unaware of that.
Because most people that say they're adults are the ones who do the most shit wrong in their own life, to be honest. And they like to feel better about themselves.
Yeah, but you know who does it? Backwards hat John McMullen.
Yeah, that's right.
The young.
And by the way, youthful... hour two, I want to mention we had the booking gods were not kind to us. We're going to get Rick Saratella, great NFL draft guy, NFL Draft Bible, the Godfather, now working for the Edmonton Eskimos of the CFL. Mark, we're going to get Rick. He had to travel. Probably the Eskimos want him to uncover some. Day 3 gem,
right?
Who's not going to get drafted. So he had to travel. He's going to be on the show Monday.
The dog sled will be up and running again.
Yeah, dog sled will be up and running. Okay. Iditarod. Maybe he's at the Iditarod. What time of year is that?
Yeah. Winter.
Well, it's always winter up there.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That's educated guess.
I'm joking. It's
I know.
Not always winter, Edmonton. And that our buddy Brian Cameron was going to fill in, and his daughter got ill this morning. She's a little under the weather, so I hope she's doing better. So we're working for you, but you got me and Farzy for hour 2.
There you go. Coming up in hour 2, I do want to uncover. Actually, we can get to this now because we're going to take a little bit of a longer segment here. The concussion test that has come out. And I'm not kidding when we're not that far removed from, how many fingers am I holding up close enough, get back out there. I remember talking to our friend Gary Cobb about this a number of times. It's like, concussion, what's a concussion? Like, we call them, what did he call them? Dingers. You got a dinger.
Yeah.
The bell rung, whatever. All right, you good? Yeah, you good? All right, get back out there, And for anyone that watched the Concussion movie or, followed the story by, was it Dateline that did it? I forget who it was, but it's been covered very well, and I think everyone understands what's going on in the NFL. But the NFL now has to have the independent neurologist on the sidelines. This is something that came up with Carson Wentz in that playoff game against the Seahawks when Jadeveon Clowney came down on him. There have been plenty of examples of concussions knocking players out of games. But now it seems like, according to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, there's the story out there right now where they just got FDA approval for something that they're calling a bedside blood concussion test. This is Pitt research, and these are the people that did the research when it came to the concussion, and the movie was based on people doing the research there at Pitt.
Those Pittsburgh guys, they're at the forefront. Dr. Joe Maroon, by the way, who once sent me a case of wine. If the doc, I hope he's still doing well, but I haven't checked in with him.
Okay.
But he was at the forefront of the concussion research. And Grant Calcaterra's doctor, who, if you remember, Grant had to retire in college from football, and then he went to one of the doctors at the University of Pittsburgh who do all that great work, and they said, no, you're good, you can resume your career after they checked him out. So kind of saved Grant Calcaterra's football career. So it's always been the forefront at those University of Pittsburgh guys.
Something must be in those the waters of the three rivers out there, but they're doing a hell of a job when it comes to neurological exams. And one of the things they have now is this test that can almost instantaneously, if they're saying that they could do this bedside, if they're saying they could do this in hospitals, if they're saying they could do this at urgent care facilities as well, they're saying they can also do it on the sidelines.
Well,
so
that I don't know, because, it was interesting because David Chow, who you probably know
of,
used to be the Chargers team doctor, does great media work now. I think it's at Pro Football Doc, if you want to follow him on X. And I got to try to get him on this show, but he's a West Coast guy. People don't like getting up at 6:20, Mark. You do a morning show. You've done a morning show for years.
Come on.
It's tough to get people up, especially on the West Coast. But anyway, he just made a quick little mention that there's a big difference between bedside and sideline. So he doesn't think it's that close. He doesn't think it's that easy to make that transition from that type of test. You muted yourself, Mark.
Yeah, the way I'm sorry, the way the story describes it is patients' bedsides, detecting concussions rapidly and accessibility right at patient's bedside, and someday sidelines at sporting events. So that would be the next step.
Yeah, he thinks that some days quite a bit away. And he's more of an expert than me, but we'll see how it shakes out. It would make things, I think, anytime you could standardize something, because, and I don't know how you can standardize concussions. Who was I talking to? Oh, man. Noel Foley. Are you a wrestling guy? Mick Foley, you muted yourself.
Mick Foley. There we go. Mick Foley. I know Mick Foley, but yeah.
Well, Noel Foley's his daughter. And she got a concussion on a roller coaster. I was talking to her at WrestleMania. She got a concussion on a roller coaster. And by the way, she's extremely attractive, Mark, so you could understand why I was talking to her.
Well, you're a smooth operator.
Yeah. Anyway,
yes,
she's still having, it's been 2 years. She's still having effects from this particular concussion. And because she had trained to be a pro wrestler, and I asked her right away, I'm like, oh, you got it when you're training? No, she got it on a roller coaster. And she hasn't recovered from it. And I only bring that up because you bring up Carson Wentz in that playoff game. It affects so many people different ways. And to get something more standard, because people were upset that Carson Wentz wasn't able to return to that game. And there were others who were very untoward about it and saying he should have tried to return to the game. It's such a murky thing. And they're still involved in the early stages of research, and it affects so many people different ways. I don't know how it becomes standardized, to be honest. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. It's hey, look, the research continues, and this, at least, the only thing that this does for me is it gives me more hope that they'll be able to do it in a more, not that I'm looking for timely fashion to be the number one priority here, accuracy as I want to be the number one priority here, but it's showing you that they're continuing to make progress in that category that obviously affects what people are very much interested in, especially in the world of football. So it's another advancement. Now you can at least put it there.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. Yeah. But we'll see how quickly bedside goes to sideline. Dr. Chow thinks it's going to take a while.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. When it comes to some things outside the medical world, some things outside the gambling world, we talked earlier in the show about Jalen Hurts and what was being said about him publicly since his press conference, and whether or not you wanted to see him be more of a leader, whether or not you want to see him be a guy that can command the offense a little bit better. I am still very curious. And going into last season, and I remember talking to you last year about the two biggest question marks going into the year had to do with the coordinator positions. Well, here we are, John, a year removed, and those two coordinators are no longer here. In fact, one didn't even finish the season as the coordinator. Well, with the title at least, but he wasn't the play caller. He got demoted, as we know, with a couple of games left in the year. Now you have two guys that have a boatload of experience in the position that they're going to be in for the Eagles as the defensive and offensive coordinator of the Eagles. We've talked a lot about Vic Fangio recently here. We just talked to him about a lot with Paul Domowitch. But when it comes to Kellen Moore, I think a lot of people look at this offense and they see A.J. Brown and they see the roster, and everyone knows the roster by now. If you're watching the show, you know the roster, who they have. But the word meshing keeps getting used every time we hear Nick Sirianni talk, whether it was the end of the year press conference where he was alluding to the offense coordinator being in control of the offense, but it'll be a meshing of what he's got and what I got. The owners' meetings in Orlando 2 weeks ago, Nick Sirianni talking at the breakfast table about a meshing of scheme here. What is it that you like to see, or what is your expectation of what that meshing is when you talk about what Nick Sirianni likes to do and what Kellen Moore likes to do? When you hear that word meshing, John, what does that word mean to you when it comes to the combination of these two offenses?
More motion. That's it.
That's the only thing.
That's it. That's it. That is it. I think it's a total overreaction to what happened at the end of last season. I'm very above board. I would have kept Nick as head coach. I would have kept Brian Johnson. This was a top 10 offense. I was a young first-time coach. The assumption that you're not going to have hiccups with a first-time offensive coordinator is ludicrous. They had hiccups with Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen in 2021. They had hiccups with Jonathan Gannon on defense in 2021. Look how that worked out in 2022 when there was a little bit of continuity. With Sean, it's more open-ended. I don't know what went on with Sean because you don't fire people at 10-1. And basically, that's when he got fired as defensive coordinator. He was kept on,
right,
but demoted, to be specific about it. So something else was going on, probably personality-wise. I kept hearing the word presence. He didn't have a presence. With Brian, it was just you needed a scapegoat because Jeffrey wasn't happy, and nobody was happy. I'm not saying you should be happy. It was embarrassing. And that's, by the way, I heard one Eagles executive in the Tampa Bay game say that during the game because of how Tampa Bay set up. They're right behind us. And the words used were, and I can say them here, baby ears, fucking embarrassing. That's how he described the Tampa Bay game.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was upset. And I get that part of it, but I think cooler heads should have prevailed at the end of the day. There's this assumption that motion is creative. It's not. It can serve a purpose. It usually tests the discipline of the defense. I certainly think the Eagles should have used it more under Nick Sirianni. They were bottom of the league. And Nick himself says you never want to be bottom 5 in the league in anything. And they're bottom 5 in motion. 32nd, to be exact. Dead last. So they should use it. Nick should have used it a little bit more and been a little bit more open-minded. But he came from Philip Rivers, who he loves. And Philip preferred to do certain things formationally to allow him to understand what the defense was doing. Other people use motion for that. Philip Rivers was the kind of guy who was smart enough, high Q. He could do that. Can you do that with a younger quarterback? Probably not. You probably need more of the tricks of the trade. So send somebody in motion, you identify coverages a little bit earlier, and that probably would have helped Jalen Hurts. That's it. That's what I think the big difference is. And
bubble screens, tight end screens. What about all that? What about that?
They're a staple of the modern NFL. Unfortunately, every team runs bubble screens. I'm not hating on them
as
much as you.
I'm hating on the and I know, what did you say was the ugliest thing you can see?
Ugliest thing.
Okay, well, I'm not so much arguing against
playing football.
I'm arguing against the frequency of them when it came to the Eagles.
Well, it's just a math equation. It's basically, and unfortunately, this is the analytical part of the game.
Oh, God, I'm bored already.
Yeah, exactly. There's an extra guy, so it's an extension of the running game. The Eagles ran it with Shane Steichen. They ran it with Brian Johnson. They ran it. It's Nick Sirianni. You got the numbers advantage, so throw it outside. And then it's about execution. The problem is they don't execute it well. And that has to do with, all right, I'm going to bore you more, Mark.
Oh, God. Here we go. You already said
the
extension of the run game thing is just that puts the quarter in the machine, man. I'm about to go in rage mode.
Blame Shane for that because he's the one, although he was more colorful about it.
Oh, even when Reed said it, even when Reed would talk about the screen game, the Brian Westbrook even, it's an extension of the run. Yeah, but it's not a run. Anyway,
that's Jody. That I had a Jody flashback. No, it's not. Well, it is from their perspective,
right?
And that's all that matters. Is so, and I said it yesterday on the show, and people who watch this show are tired of hearing me saying it, but I say it because I want to drill it into people's heads and I want them to realize it. People do not judge play calling. They judge play results. And I say it all the time, Mark. I talked to Doug Peterson about this, and Doug was very honest about it. And he said, guess what? Sometimes the players pick him up and he's got a crappy play call, and a great player, Zach Ertz, 4th and 1 in the Super Bowl. That's all Zach Ertz, man. Manipulating, and to a certain degree, Nick Foles, just having a feel for the game, converting. And sometimes you have the greatest play call ever, and you got the other team. You got them in the perfect situation, and you got them. And maybe the right guard misses a block. Maybe the right tackle. Well, Lane doesn't miss many blocks, but you get my point.
Yeah.
One guy bucks it up. Nobody ever knows you got the best play call ever on. So they don't judge play calls. They judge play results. So anytime you hear, and that's about teaching and execution, right? Getting guys in the right position to succeed and making sure they know what to do on a particular play.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's what I'll take exception to. I think Philadelphia, and I can't speak for every fan base, but I think Philadelphia does argue play call more more often than not argues play call over result. Now, the result is the headline. It's ultimately what matters. But, for instance, the Devontae Smith blocking on a screen to, was it Quez Watkins? Or I can't remember if it was Quez or Dallas Goedert in Seattle. And when Devontae Smith got hurt. I think most people went, even if that's not a smart play call, like even if you get a couple of yards out of that and you get a gain, that's not a smart play call. Or if Jalen Hurts throws the ball downfield 1st and 10 with 8:15 left in the 4th quarter and you're winning, that's not a smart play call. It's not a smart decision by Jalen Hurts in that situation.
It's not a smart decision. It's ironic in the Seattle game, since you brought that up. Look, the bubble screen is, again, that's like launch angle in baseball or 3-pointers in basketball. That's the analytical part of the game. Again, numbers. Who's got the numbers? So everybody runs it, and then it's about execution. And even Devontae at his size has to block occasionally on a bubble screen. You get hurt, obviously it's going to look bad. And certainly if you miss a block, it's going to look like the shittiest play ever, which it always does when you miss that block. But it's ironic. Seattle won the game on the exact same play, but they executed it. In the case of Jalen Hurts, that was a poor decision, as you mentioned, because Seattle was playing cover 2, might have been cover 3, but either way, they had a safety back on that side of the field. He underthrew the football to A.J. Brown, number 1. And
no, that was the end of the game. That was the end of the game.
The end of the game. That's, and Seattle, by the way, if you go back to Drew Lock, he read it correctly. Same play. Eagles didn't have the safety over the top. They beat Bradbury. I believe it was Bradbury. Touchdown. Holds up. They win the game. Eagles are trying the same thing. And they had won on that play in previous games. It's never a bad thing to try to go to A.J. Brown down the field, as long as you don't have Julian Love over the top and you're underthrowing the football. So again, execution, decision-making, more than play call. And that was the freelancing play, by the way. That wasn't even the play call. That was an audible at the line of scrimmage where AJ and Jalen thought they had something and they didn't. So yeah, a lot of layers to it, but people are judging that result and saying that's a terrible play call. Well, it wasn't even the play call. It was an audible because they thought they had something.
On that, just real quick on this, because I do want to move on for it, but I remember Shane Steichen saying, I think it was after 2 years ago, the Arizona game, where, I mean, you talk about bubble screens and tight end screens. That seemed like all they were doing in the second half. And I remember Shane Steichen saying that that was a comfort zone play for Jalen Hurts. And a lot of those were check downs. And I heard Nick Sirianni echo that same sentiment. I don't remember Jalen Hurts ever backing that up. I don't remember him being asked about it even, but that's why I talk about, when I talk about the Eagles offense and kind of the quad of blame when it comes to the Eagles offense, I talk about analytics from Jeffrey Lurie's influence, Julian Lurie's influence, and all that. I talk about Brian Johnson, of course. I talk about the game planning of Nick Sirianni. And then I talk about Jalen Hurts' decision-making. And it's like when I watch a play and it doesn't go well, or I watch them line up and I think this seems curious. What's going on here? I think, okay, well, who am I blaming here? Is this the analytic influence? Is this Jalen Hurts' comfort zone? Is this what the game plan was going into it? Or is this Brian Johnson trying to make the best possible play call he can and it's just not working out? And I think that could be said for almost every NFL franchise.
Nobody goes into a game saying, I'm going to throw 15 bubble screens. I will say that.
Okay, fair enough.
Brian Johnson, but when college football starts up again, just turn on the first college football game. You're going to see 15 bubble screens. That's what they do at the college level. Is Jalen Hurts comfortable with that versus a more traditional check down? Probably. So what you think of a check down is, and most people, most longtime football fans think of as, dumping it off to the back. Progression 1. You got your monitor. Mark Varzetta's got his progression. There we go. 1, 2, dump it down to Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts is probably more comfortable with, the bubble screen because where did he learn? He learned at Alabama. He learned under Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, where he had his most success. Watch a freaking Lincoln Riley game. Settle in. You're going to see some bubble screens.
All right. So note to self, stop watching Lincoln Riley. No. Fair enough. All right. I want to ask you one more question, and I'm going to save it for when we come back, but I'm going to ask you now. You can think about it. One thing, and people in the chat, feel free to comment on this as well. If you're Kellen Moore, the first thing you do in that meeting where Jalen Hurts wants to be a sponge, what are you doing with Jalen Hurts to make sure you get the best version of Jalen Hurts? It could be Nussmeier. It could be Kellen Moore. What's the first thing this new coaching staff, I'll make it more general, should do with Jalen Hurts to make him get back to the quarterback that we saw competing for an MVP award and taking his team to the Super Bowl? Number one thing you got to do. We'll talk about that when we come back here on Birds 365.
Imagine for a moment that you went to work today and when you came home, you were catastrophically injured. Your life and your family's life. That's what happened to union construction worker Mike Little.
I was scared of what the end was going to be, but to be 100% honest with you, I knew I was going to be all right just by talking with Brian. In my heart, I just knew everything was going to be all right.
Call the firm and find out why they say, "We got this." Call 215-458-2222.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
For the big story on Action News,
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
First 365, Mark Farzetta, John McMullen with you. So, John, you're Kellen Moore. You're Coach Nuss.
Coach Nuss.
The recruiting thing that you mentioned earlier, when Jalen said, "Oh yeah, Coach, he recruited me to Florida," and I'm like, "Well, fail." And I'm like, "Okay, so you met him?"
I've been saying,
yeah.
So, what I said about Brian Johnson. Well, he recruited me to Mississippi State and Florida. Fail.
The only time I cared, honestly, about that recruit connection, I'll call it that way, is Devin White and Nakobe Dean. I thought, that's two players there. Little bonding moment there on the recruitment trip. All right, maybe there's something. You know, they've kept in touch since then.
Put that in the same circular trash can, Mark. They didn't go to the same school. So
I would at least put that. You know what I would do with it? I would put it in the junk drawer. Like I'm not ready to. I'm not ready to throw it out yet. It just goes
in the trash can in the kitchen. I got you. I got to clean that thing out, Mark.
Where batteries that I think are still usable are in there. You know, I'm not really sure. There's like an old cell phone in there. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. That junk drawer. That's where that goes. But at least it's two guys that have that relationship, and they're going to be playing next to each other there.
I wouldn't count on that yet. Let's see who linebacker gets picked in the second round.
Oh, John, we didn't even sit on this one for a minute, or have you already mentioned this?
I don't believe in a million years that they're going to be happy just with no competition for Devin White. I mean, the contract tells you all you need to know.
Yeah,
they gave him $3.5 million. If Edgerrin Cooper drops to 50, which I don't think he will.
Mm-hmm.
Day one starter next to Nakobe Dean.
All right. No, I if that's where they go, I agree with you 100%. And that's also why I didn't like. And this is the NFL we've talked about this before about the agents, and this is what they do. And nothing makes me laugh harder than when whoever it is, even if it's Adam Schefter, they put out the tweet. They get this money. Breaking news. They sign whoever. Oh, thanks to Clutch Sports for telling us, whatever.
Yeah.
When they credit the agent or the agency, I just laugh my ass off because it's like, oh, thank you for telling me your source on your numbers. But with Devin White, it was the $7.5 million deal that was originally reported.
I think it, and it, yeah, 7.1. Yeah.
7 which is exactly what TJ Edwards is getting in Chicago. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, they're not paying a linebacker $7.5 million. Get the hell out of here. So you got to do the thing. You got to wait. And then the real number comes out. The real number, as you alluded to, was 3.5.
You know, our buddy Jimmy Kempski was, he likes to point out the absurdity of the agents. And that's where, for those who don't know, and I think most people know by now, that's where all the contract info that Schefter and people like that get as information brokers. Mike Sealski, by the way, hat tip to Mike for coming up with that term.
What was it again? Hit me with that one more time.
Information brokers. That's what he calls the Schefters, the Wojs of the world. Because you got to scratch the back of the agents. And Jimmy likes to point out, and it was, I forget the tight end, but one of the tight ends signed, and Steve Carrick's an agent who's big with tight ends. And like 3 different ones said, use the same phrasing, tight end guru, whatever. And it was just, Jimmy pointed it out. It was a funny little moment. All
right.
You got to call the guy tight end guru to get the information.
All right. I'll ask you this question before the break. I asked you the question about if you're Coach Nuss, if you're Kellen Moore, what are you doing with Jalen Hurts? What's one thing, the first thing you want to do in that first meeting? If you're going to change something about Jalen Hurts' game, what's it going to be?
Change something? I don't know. What I want to stress, and Damo brought up some of the points that, he's got to get more comfortable climbing the pocket. That's my biggest concern on the field versus blushing immediately when he feels pressure, because that's always a bad situation. He's got to get more comfortable manipulating the pocket. But from a holistic standpoint, I'm going to say get him back to where he trusts what he sees, because I think he was hesitating a lot and not trusting what was there and holding on to the football. So, somebody's open, that first progression, I always get a kick out of it. You got to go through your progressions. No, you don't. Not if the first guy's open. In fact, that's where you should go. Progression 1. If he's open, bang. Bang. Trust what you see. That's what I would say. How do you get there? It's easier said than done.
All right.
AJ's always open. That's his Twitter handle.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at you looking at the internet now.
X handle. Devontae's open a lot. Dallas is open a lot. Trust what you see. Don't hesitate.
And you were hitting on something else, and we'll talk more about that. But also, you sounded like you were about to say something like embrace. There's something he could also embrace about his game.
Well, from
encourage, I guess.
From Kellen's perspective, I don't want to limit that +1 aspect of the running game, and that's the most important thing that he has to mesh with, because he's never had that before. Dak's a great thrower of the football. Justin Herbert's arguably even better. And they can move a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, but not like Jalen. So don't, try to turn him into Dak Prescott and you said it, embrace the uniqueness of the player. And well, you were quoting Nick, but yeah, I mean, he's a unique player. Embrace it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also think Nick lied to us. I think that was a great line from him, and then I didn't see a lot of that embracing.
Well, he shouldn't be lying. That shouldn't be a lie, because, like Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, embrace it. It's not to that level, but whoever gets Shaden Daniels, if you're going to try to turn him into a pocket quarterback, just, go draft Drake May.
Right.
Embrace the uniqueness.
I want to see if I have to make the call, if I'm Kellen Moore, I'm incorporating him in the foundation. Like with Jalen Hurts, and
when he incorporate the quarterback in the foundation.
Well, in terms of his skill set, like when Jalen Hurts, and what I mean by that specifically is when Jalen Hurts was talking about how he's going to sit and wait for the foundation to be set by the coaches. Okay, great. Well, if you're Kellen Moore, a big part of that foundation, the guy that you're, stirring that foundation, that concrete with, better be Jalen Hurts. So you better be modeling a lot of the things that you want to do after what his unique skill set is. And that should be a wide variety of things. If you're Kellen Moore, you should be excited that you're going to have Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, and he knew that taking the job, and I'm sure that's a big part of why he took the job. But more specifically about what you see from Jalen Hurts, usually this is a negative thing. If you speed up the clock in a quarterback's head, that's a negative thing because it could mean that you're talking about happy feet. It could mean that he's panicking a little bit, but I'm not talking about that. I mean, more so expediting the process. If that wide receiver, or excuse me, if that receiver 1 isn't open, boom, 2, boom, 3, that process has to go faster in his head. More efficient, I think, would be a better way to put it. And that means at times, yes, you have to manipulate the pocket to buy you that extra second if that's what you need. If you don't have a Hall of Fame center blocking for you right in front of you, like you did over the course of your career to this point, you're going to have to learn how to do that and learn how to feel that pressure and be able to manipulate that. And that means that extra beat, maybe a guy does get open. Maybe a guy does get half a step. And that also means that you're not defaulting so quickly into being flushed out to your right or being forced out to your left, trying to dictate where that coverage is going to be for the line of scrimmage with your offensive line in order to find those open guys downfield. That's going to be the first thing, is making Jalen Hurts more of an efficient thinker. And I think he's smart enough to be able to do that. The second thing is, and this is a schematic thing, this is really not much to do with Jalen other than it's okay to throw to the running back. It's okay to find a guy out of the backfield on a wheel route, on a dump off, a check down, whatever. It doesn't always have to be in a bubble screen, wide receiver screen, running back screen. Not that you saw too many of those, but it's okay to throw to the guy that's coming out of the backfield. The Eagles had the worst team, or again, you talk about bad being bottom 5. 2 years ago, they were the worst team in catching balls out of the backfield with running backs. Last year, they were around that same area as well. So that's something I'd love to see them from a schematic standpoint be able to embrace.
Yeah,
so it gives Jalen Hurts. It gives Jalen Hurts the idea of, all right, if it's not down there, it's right here next to me.
Yeah, we should have talked about with Domo because he would have been on Team Parzetta there. I'm like, I don't care about dumping the ball off to the running back with Jalen Hurts. I care with that if I had Phillip Rivers, and that's where Nick did it a lot because he had to do it a lot. Jalen's more capable of extending the play or getting more than dumping it off to the running back. That's sort of embracing the uniqueness. I'm a little bit concerned they're trying to pigeonhole that. I'm not talking about screens. You mentioned wheel routes. Those are design plays, and that's fine. If you want to design a play for Saquon Barkley, go for it.
Oh, and I think that's the biggest difference this year.
But the dump offs, no. Does Baltimore ask Lamar to dump it off? Does anybody? If they do, they should be run out of Baltimore. That's just dumb. They're going to get more than a running back. If you look at Saquon's history, other than his rookie year, you could make a strong argument DeAndre Swift was a better pass catching back. They didn't use DeAndre Swift at all.
Mm-hmm.
My argument was on those bubble screens early. Get the running back involved with those, because those are plays where you got to make that first guy miss. You got to get a block and make the first guy miss. Who's better equipped to do that, a wide receiver or a running back? I think a running back is. So if you want to get Saquon involved in those bubble screens, again, all for it. But dumping it off, 6.4 yards per reception. This is Saquon Barkley, last 3 years. The one good year he had, it was 5.9. It was under 6 yards. Last year, it was the best ever, 6.8, dating back to his early days. Not a lot of success with those dump offs. And that's all running backs. I mean, it's you don't need that when you have a quarterback that can extend plays like Jalen Hurts and can run the football himself. Embrace the uniqueness. Don't put a lid on it like he's Joe Biden and it's 3:00 and you got to keep him away from people. Yeah, don't put a lid on that.
All right, I'll use another Nick Sirianni phrase. A wise man avoids all extremes.
Yeah.
Right?
It's one of my favorites.
This is pretty extreme. We're talking about a guy. I'm not talking about a guy that I want. I don't want Jalen Hurts' game to be predicated on, all right, who's the guy that's closest to me, and let me just dump it down to him. But again, you can go to the Seattle game. You have Kenny Gainwell open at the line of scrimmage 2 different occasions. And once he bombs it down the field to Quez Watkins, and then at the end of the game, he bombs it down the field to AJ Brown.
That's
like those. Like I want him to at least acknowledge that it's part of the game. That you can. All right, you know what? Maybe I can just. Yeah, and in a lot of ways,
that's fair. He fell in love with the big play, and people.
That's what I mean. And he's not avoiding the extreme. He's not avoiding the extreme. Is my point.
Yeah. Well, you do have to take what they're giving you, and if they're playing the safeties in the parking lot, you got to be smart enough to say, I got to throw the ball underneath. But to me, I'm just simply talking about, the traditional progression people think, 1, 2, and then nobody gets the 3. There's few Peyton Mannings anymore. And then they just dump it down the running back. That's what I'm talking about. Now, again, if you have, you got AJ going down the field, maybe you got a crosser to Devontae, and then you have Kenny Gainwell leaking out. That's part of the progression. That's fine. Take what's there, and he needs to be better at that.
The baseball analogy is singles are okay.
Yeah,
they don't all have to be triples and home runs. You can take a single every once in a while.
In baseball, all they want is home runs, right? They don't want 3 singles. That's launch angle. Nobody cares about batting average because you can't get 3 singles.
Oh, no. I am not in that category, friend. Yeah. Oh, that's another one. That's another quarter in the machine. Oh, good God. Baseball is great. Batting average still very much matters.
Launch angle, baby. Go swing for the fences.
I watched a game recently with an old school baseball guy, and he was like, what's this launch angle thing? And I was trying to explain it to him. And like exit velo.
Yeah.
And he goes, you mean good wood?
Good wood.
And I'm like, damn it. Yep, that's exactly what I mean. That's all it is. It's just a harder way of saying good wood, essentially.
Now, I had, and Jody's a baseball guy.
Yeah.
And we got to wrap up the show. But I was at, back in the olden days, when you get the Sunday paper, what's the first thing you looked at, Mark? You looked at the big baseball statistic.
Sure.
And there would be always that 1 or 2 guys that were under what we called the Mendoza line, which was an absolute embarrassment to be under 200. Now you got a bunch of guys. All right, he's hitting 180, but he's got 20 home runs.
Yeah, with an OBP of 350 or something. Yeah.
Couple walks. Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I was brought back to the only time I could really check, other than the Sunday paper, was the back of the baseball card. The back of the baseball card had all the information, and it was so disappointing because Donruss, I think, came up with this is a little off football, but anyway, Donruss came out with the cards that they had like fun facts on the back.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't give a damn about what's his favorite ice cream flavor. I want to know what
your bunt backs and your crappy gun, Donruss.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't need that. Hey, John, another fun-filled day with you, my friend. This was a good time.
Yeah, Mark, always a pleasure. To get
absolutely
great Mark Barzetta. I'm lucky. I get
you hang out with Mike Gill,
Tony Bruno back in the day, Jody Mack, Mark Barzetta, and Mike Gill, all the big wigs.
Yeah, I've only met Mike Gill a couple times. He has hair, right? He's not a bald man.
No, he's not a bald man.
What's it like to work with a hair guy?
Well, jealousy. I'm also jealous of his voice. He's got that voice like he's smoked for 40 years and so deep. Yeah. Yeah.
John, what are you doing this weekend? Anything good?
Nice little Sunday plan. Maybe a little Bed Bath and Beyond, maybe Home Depot if I got some time. Who knows?
You mentioned
I'm gonna grill, I think, this weekend.
Now
by the way, I got 75 draft things I gotta do. So I'm actually gonna be working far too much. Draft is next week, in case you hadn't heard.
I'm aware. I got some Phillies coverage tonight. I have obviously Sixers coverage on Saturday, so I'll be looking at that.
Sixers. By the way, are they unfurling the play-in banner at the Wells Fargo Center? Are they gonna put that down?
Yeah, I believe so. It's a big. It's slightly bigger than the Iverson statue, and they're gonna unfurl that, and we'll all celebrate the parade. It goes, I think, through Camden.
Yeah, down Hampton Avenue. I argued that if they won the season tournaments or the play-in game.
Yeah,
you have the parade down Haddon Avenue. You go through Collingswood. You go into Camden to the Sixers facility. Yeah, perfect situation.
Those are two different countries. Collingswood and Camden. You have to
they are.
Show your passport. John, honestly, always a pleasure, my friend. It's great to be with you today, man.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Hey, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Go Phils, go Sixers. And here's the Howie and keep on wowing us with a couple more moves.
He likes the trades. Get ready.
He absolutely does. Thanks for watching Birds 365. Make sure you subscribe here to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. See ya.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.